This is the second part of creation evolution, and despite a lot of cranks coming up and saying it's rubbish, I intend to press on. We looked at 6 types of evolution last week. 6 types. What are they?
Cosmic,
chemical,
stellar, organic, micro, but not really.
And micro. Okay. We understood that to label anything as scientific, we must be able to apply the rules of science to it. Thus, we need 3 things. What is it? I said last week, we need to see it, test it, and demonstrate it. The 3 rules of science. We need to see it, test it, and demonstrate it. In other words, in a laboratory, we need to carry out experiments that are repeatable, and we can show this and this and this. However, we cannot do these, well, that with 5 of these 6. As you so rightly said, microevolution is not really evolution anyway. So we cannot do it with cosmic, chemical, stellar, organic, and macro. These have to all be accepted by faith. Therefore, it's not a scientific theory, but it's a religion. It's a religion. Of course, you may say that you prefer that explanation of the way the earth was formed, which is fine. But please don't call it scientific, for it cannot be proved and must be accepted by faith. The fact that it requires more faith to believe this story than to believe that God made it all is your individual choice. Scripture says, 1:18, Romans 1:18, please Neville, Romans 1:18 to 23.
For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, the invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse, because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things.
It's very interesting, because God says that you can know by looking at creation. You can know that he exists. And that they chose to not believe in God. They chose of their own free will to not believe in God. We also learned that microevolution is not really evolution because there are different types of dog, but a dog is a dog. You understand, there's different types of cow, but a cow is a cow, and so on and so forth. We also went on to look at some school books, textbooks, which on the surface are quite laughable. But we need to remember this is serious, for they're teaching our children this trash.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing. So let's go on to look at a few more quotes from notable evolutionists. I stress these are quotes from notable evolutionists, not creationists. As I gave you last week, I want to do it again, but we'll go on and take a few more. Francis Crick, Life Itself, Its Origin and Nature, on page 88. An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have had to be satisfied to get it going. Professor Jerome Lejeune, if I've said that correctly, Lejeune, in speaking at a lecture in Paris in March the 17th, 1985, he said, "We have no acceptable theory of evolution at the present time. The neo-Darwinistic synthetic theory we know is bad, but there isn't any other. So we teach that." Amazing. Professor Dawkins, you all know Dawkins, the blind watchmaker in 1996, he wrote, "The only alternative explanation of the sudden appearance of so many complex animal types in the Cambrian era is divine creation, and we reject this alternative." That's it. P. Davis, Life Force, New Scientists in 1999. How did stupid atoms write their own software? Nobody knows. There is no known law of physics able to create information from nothing. It's interesting that the simplest cell is more complex than the rocket that takes people to the moon. It's more complex.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a simple cell.
Exactly.
So Arthur Keith, please note, Professor Sir Arthur Keith, Did Man Just Happen? Page 73. Evolution is unproved and unprovable. We only believe it because the only alternative is special creation, and that's unthinkable. Soren Lovetrop, Darwinism and the Refutation of a Myth, page 422. I suppose that nobody will deny that it is a great misfortune if an entire branch of science becomes addicted to a false theory. But this is what has happened to biology. I believe that one day the Darwinism myth will be ranked the greatest deceit in the history of science. When this happens, many people will pose the question, how did it ever happen? Interesting. Evolutionists speak out. As I delve into this subject more and more, I'm amazed that wise men, as we will consider them, can refuse to believe creation, although its truth is obvious to them. As we've already quoted, Romans 1:22, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. In fact, reading the quoted saying of respected evolutionists, it seems obvious that they will go so far as to tell lies to promulgate their teaching. Looking again at a quote from an eminent evolutionist, which we quoted last week, H.S. Lipson, Professing of Physics, University of Winchester, UK, a physicist's look at evolution. It was contained in the Physics Bulletin, volume 31, page 130. In fact, evolution became, in a sense, a scientific religion. Almost all scientists have accepted it, and many are prepared to bend their observations to fit with it. To my mind, the theory doesn't stand up at all. I think, however, that we must go further than this and admit that the only acceptable explanation is creation. I know that this is an anathema to physicists, as it is indeed to me. But we must not reject a theory that we do not like if the experimental evidence supports it. As I've said before, one of the most astounding things we looked at last week is the quotes from various school textbooks. It's difficult to choose a scripture that will say that, but I think the following is appropriate. 1 Timothy 4:2, please, Martin. 1 Timothy 4:2.
Speaking lies in hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron.
Okay. I think that covers it, just about. Now, there are 10 strata systems that geologists use to compose the standard geologic column. They are claimed by many, as a major proof of the evolutionary theory. Now I've given you a sheet which contains that. And that is taken from the internet, and it is agreed that that's the geologic column, and you'll understand there are eras: Paleozoic, Mesozoic and Cenozoic, or something, whatever it is. And then we start with Precambrian, Cambrian at 600 million years, although whatever it is, Silurian, Devonian, etc., etc. And they give you typical fossils which are contained in that column. Yeah? The typical fossils here. Now, regretfully, I'm going to have to read this because it's all from a science book, okay? Entitled Rock Layers Timeline of Life on Earth. And what you need to do is turn over and look at that one. Okay? And you've got a man digging at the top, and the caption underneath is, so the deeper we dig, the further back in time we see. Yeah? My evolutionary textbook says evolution is a complicated subject. While everybody understands that black bears are related to grizzly bears, and we can even figure that they are related to extinct bears, lots of people wonder how scientists can be sure that bears are related to salmon as well. Now, one evidence, he says, or is written, one evidence is rock layers, specifically what is called the geologic column. Basically, goes on, scientists have learned that rocks are stacked in layers containing fossils, with the oldest fossils at the deepest layers and the youngest or most recent fossils near the top. It's as if rock layers are a vertical timeline. Okay, the book goes on. At the bottom of the timeline there are no fossils of modern animals. As you move towards the surface you find fish, then amphibians, then reptiles, mammals, birds, and finally modern mammals, including humans. We're not talking about an abstract diagram. This is the actual record of the Earth's crust recorded in rocks around the world. He states. And it goes on. But how do we know this evolutionary sequence of layers, one on top of the other, is accurate? Why is there any order at all to the rock layers? And answers it. Two laws or principles of geology explain why rock layers are formed this way. And the two laws are, one, the law of original horizontality. the law of original horizontality. If anybody could say that better than I can. This law of science tells us that dirt, mud, sand and other sediments are almost always deposited in horizontal layers. As these sediments stack up vertically, they often harden, forming rock layers. Now, the law of superposition that's the next law, the law of superposition. Rock layers are usually ordered with the oldest layers on the bottom and the most recent layers on the top. The law of faunal succession, if you want to know that what that says. Faunal. Yeah?
Plants.
Yes.
Thunder.
Explains that fossils found in rock layers are ordered in this way. Because they then go on in this handbook of a 3-layer cake. Okay? Everybody ready? Okay. There are thousands upon thousands of layers in the Earth's crust. However, scientists have grouped the layers into major groups. The most recent 3 layers are the Paleozoic, Mesozoic and Cenozoic, which you have in your original diagram. Okay? These layers represent the last 500 million years of life on Earth. And if you like to look at that one, it'll... Okay. So, invertebrates and jawless fish and jawed fish and amphibians and reptiles and dinosaurs, early mammals, monkeys and apes and modern mammals, and it goes, so it goes on. Okay? In the Paleozoic, you find fish, amphibian and reptile fossils in that order, but never dinosaurs, birds, modern mammals or even flowering plants. Right, now where were we? Think of that. Despite the billions of plant fossils in the Paleozoic layer, nobody has ever found one fossil of a flower, including any kind of deciduous tree or even a single blade of grass. Why not? The obvious explanation is flowers had not evolved yet. Everybody with me?
No.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Into them.
We'll go on. The next layer, the Mesozoic, is often called the age of the dinosaurs. The Mesozoic has dinosaurs like crazy. Of course, dinosaurs are reptiles, and that's why you won't find any until after the Paleozoic, which contains the first reptiles. If you believe this, better the man than I can't get in. Okay. On top of the Paleozoic and Mesozoic is the Cenozoic. Fair enough. This is the current layer that is still being deposited in oceans, deserts and swamps all around the earth today. The Cenozoic is the first major layer where we find modern mammal fossils like cats, dogs, monkeys and humans. This layer or era is often referred to as the age of mammals. These three layers make up a sort of a three-layer cake. Just like a cake, the bottom layer went down first, followed by the middle and the top. Since fossils progressed from fish at the bottom to humans at the top, we have clear evidence that life evolved through time. Now, it goes on to explain the half-eaten cake. Of course, there isn't one place in the world to go and see every fossil from all time stacked on one top of the other. In fact, it's rare to find all three major layers on top of one another. Why not? Well, the first obvious answer is that even in the world today, there are places where sediments layers are deposited, but in other places, like mountains, they are eroded. So gaps are a common occurrence in many regions. Also, while the layers are usually deposited in clear order, those layers are often disturbed later on by volcanoes, rivers, mountains and shifting continents. Look at the diagram, which is that one. Okay? If you can understand that, you're better man than I am Gungadin, because I can't understand it fully. But there we are. Look at the diagram. If you were to stand on the cliff to the left side of the cross section, you would see the top layers in two places. The cracks or faults in the rock have slid the layers out of alignment. Only when you view the entire area can you piece the original order back together. Everybody happy?
Yep.
Sorry?
I don't understand a word of this.
It's like going back to school again now.
Di, you don't have to worry, because I'm going to make a statement in which will yeah, anyway. He goes on to say, the crust of the earth is made of several huge plates. These plates float on the hot, soft mantle below the crust. We can actually measure the movement of the plates using satellites in space. Every year they shift in different directions, each on their own path. Sometimes the plates collide, causing mountains. Other times they separate and hot magma flows up to form volcanic islands and new land. It happens slowly but surely. And as it does, our nice three-layer cake becomes a little messier. It's as if somebody slid the cake off the table and the dog ate half of it before Dad comes to the rescue. Look at any one spot and you might not find all three layers in the right order. But look at the big picture and the original order is still visible. There are many evidences of evolution, but the geologic column remains the most obvious clue to the history of life on earth. Now, that sounds very knowledgeable, yeah? And well thought out. But there's one problem. What is that?
Time.
It's a downright lie. Nowhere in the world does this geologic column appear. In fact, fossils are randomly distributed through the various layers. The notion that the Earth's crust has an onion skin structure with successive layers containing all strata systems distributed on a global scale is not according to the facts. In fact, the entire geologic column composed of complete strata systems exists only in diagrams drawn by geologists. Any questions? In other words, you've been listening to the biggest load of bunk you can listen to for the last half hour.
Actually, what is there?
Because it doesn't exist.
What we do
Just
see.
digressing a little bit, they've had to change their thinking about climate change because all their figures, they suddenly realised that the satellites they were taking their statistics from weren't quite in the same place that they originally thought they were. So they've had to completely readjust all their climate model.
I'm sure we will get an awful lot of brickbat from people who watch the video.
So that's climate change. I mean, this
But it doesn't matter.
No.
The fact is that we have it on the best authority that this geologic column, composed of the complete strata systems, exists only in the diagrams drawn by geologists.
If you look at it, it can actually show you that there was a flood.
Sure. In fact, if you take the layers, I mean, you go to the Grand Canyon, yeah? You can see the layers. Millions and millions and millions of years. But there's only one problem. The top of the Grand Canyon is 4 miles above the river. Where the river comes out, it's 4 miles below where the top of the canyon is. Water doesn't flow uphill to cut its way down. You understand? So how did it come? How did it occur? Besides which, if all those layers were laid down millions of years, why is there no evidence of the washing away of layers? I mean, after all, didn't it rain for millions of years? Ridiculous, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
It's that time factor again.